Let our love for thee increase. May thy blessings never cease. Give us plenty, give us peace. God defend our free land from dishonor and from shame. God, our country's spotless name, crown her with immortal fame. God defend New Zealand. Mountains ever be, Thames ramparts on the sea, as faithful unto thee, thy defend our free land. In this nation fair, praise to love and truth to man. Now thy glorious hand, God defend New Zealand. Oh, aroha mai. Hang on, I'll just remove this one. Sorry about that. Sorry, I was actually looking on my phone. I was just doing a little bit of research while I was playing God Defend New Zealand. As you can see, I'm all rugged up. Got my little mittens waiting to put on. We're just going to be heading off to Tamaki Makaurau to watch the Kiwis play Tonga. And we've been to a number of Kiwi Tongan games when they had the World Cup in Hamilton. Oh, OMG. Oh my gosh. It's an amazing feeling. I was up dancing with all the Tongans and singing with them. And we were like, we would tend to wear our blacks or whatever blacks we have on. And my husband's got a silver fern top on and all of this. This is my nephew's jacket that he gave to me when he was in the New Zealand schoolboys team. So I'll wear this with pride. And like I said yesterday, mana wātea matariki or mana wātea puhanga. And puhanga is we follow the star of puhanga, and that's the star that we see. We don't see matariki or the celestial stars, the clusters of sisters. We don't see matariki, we see puhanga. And there are some iwi that acknowledge and celebrate puhanga. And so yesterday I had to, because it was the first authentic Māori day off, and those of us, we know what we're talking about when we have a little giggle about that. But anyway, but this was authentic, right? But it did also raise some concerns with me, and I was obligated to do a live yesterday. One, to acknowledge Rangi Mātāmua for all his mahi and the tonga that was passed down from his tupuna to him, and how he brought out our revitalized our maramataka. because we are celestial people. That's how we found our way to Aotearoa. That's how, if you look at He Whakapūtanga and you look at Te Tiriti, that was our tupuna sharing Aotearoa with the rest of the world, and particularly through a relationship between my tupuna and England, through the royal family, I guess, if you want to put it like that. But anyway, I thought I'd do a live before I go and enjoy my time with my darling in Tamaki Makaurau. It's the first time I've been able to sit in my seat where I normally do my lives. Really, my father has been my priority over the last month. Yeah. So I've tagged myself out so I can get a bit of reset myself, because that's what's people call it Māori New Year. We never looked at it as a Māori New Year. We are cyclical people. We follow cycles. We follow the moon cycles and the different stages of the moon. And matariki or puanga is just part of that cycle. And it really is about when to rest, when to reset, and when to plant, and when to go to work. Now, when to mahi, and when to go to war even. So our tohunga of those days would look up and read the signs, and there are many signs, and we've lost that ability because of colonization. So what Rangi Mātāmu, and I'm surprised he's not a Sir actually for the mahi that he's done, but watch the space, I said it first. He should be for all the mahi that he's done. But there have been a lot of people that have worked in the celestial space as well, even prior to Rangi. But he's the one that's brought it right. He's written books. My daughter's got his book. He's brought back our maramataka practices, and even our kaumātua still practice their gardening through the maramataka to this day, right? To this day. We, as a younger generation, the more modern, modern colonized generation, have lost touch with our kaumātua and following those same practices, even though we were brought up with those practices. So it's a real shame, really. But Rangi Mātāmua has done a lot of mahi in that space, and so I want to acknowledge him. I also went warning yesterday too, because the Prime Minister talked about this being an opportunity to reset. And that Freemasons are all about symbols and symbolisms. And someone made me aware yesterday, and it blew my mind, to be honest, but I'm going to mention it here today, that the 24th of the 6th, 2022 equals 666. So I hope these Freemasons, and we know Jacinda and her father, and we know that our Parliament is sitting. I mean, the whole of Wellington is a Freemason space, right? And so when we look at the spiritual attack, we have to understand that type of practices. And that's why I've always said that if our leaders belong to a secret society, they have to disclose that they do, because their alignment to that secret society does not put our people first, right? And I've said that for forever, actually. And kei te pai if they belong to it. I'm not saying that people shouldn't join it. Join the whatever. I'm not saying you shouldn't join a rugby club, boys club, or secret society. What I'm saying, that if you make decisions on behalf of me and my whānau, and you align, for example, with the World Economic Forum, and their white papers become our law, then I have a problem, and you should have a problem with that as well. So, and I don't know if you've seen on Facebook how Jacinda Ardern seems to be in shock, and it's like passing the hot potato. So now the problem becomes the Reserve Bank governor's problem rather than her problem, right? And everybody can blame the pandemic, blame the war, blame Tamir. on the cost of living and inflation. Look, when I fueled my car up to go back to my waka, because we take diesel, we were only a few cents less than than 91. So, so once upon a time, because you still have to pay your road users on top of your diesel, right? So it's just the way that the government's going to try and force us to sell our utes, because it becomes so expensive to put diesel into our waka. I think to get 20 litres cost me $62, something like that, for 20 litres. I mean, holy wrecker. Holy heck. That's bloody expensive. It's nearly $200 to fuel our waka up with diesel. I mean, tell me, how many whānau can afford $200 to fuel their waka up? Whilst we shut down our only oil refinery in New Zealand, one of the best in the world, and you wonder why there's a protest going on, and the media's absolutely silent. I've been following the platform with Sean Plunkett. I know Sean personally. What's interesting about the issues that he's bringing up, he's starting to say what we've been saying all along. That the media's brought, because he brought up issues about Nanaia Mahuta and her whānau and had all the evidence there. Not one mainstream media picked it up. I did have a kōrero on that, and I don't want to get into that take today, because Māori, you got to remember, nepotism is normal in Māori. Why you say is nepotism normal in Māori? Because our whānau, we're made up of whānau. Our marae are made up of whānau. Our hapu are made up of clusters of marae who are made up of whānau. Our hapu are made up, our iwi are made up on clusters of hapu who are made up of whānau. So we're inter-whānau related. We're interlinked. And you got to remember that the Right Honourable Nanaia Mahuta comes from a rangatira line, both on the Ariki side and both in the mahi that they do. And so it's not unusual in the Māori space for rangatira line to take the roles that they take. And I just want to make that clear. That's how it is for us as Māori. I'm not saying whether what they're doing is right or wrong. I'm just saying that's what it is. Okay, but I don't want to venture off the kaupapa, because the kaupapa really is about inflation. I mean, $200 to travel backwards and forwards to New Plymouth for me is a must. And I want to talk about our experience in the hospital. But again, today I'm not going to do that. But I do want to get around to talking about it, because I'm also going to write an article for the Outdoors and Freedom Party, who want to know about my experience with my papa in the hospital. Whilst you're trying to, get the best care for your parent, your elderly parent, ensure that they're well looked after, and that means you have to stay there basically and become their 24-hour nurse. It was quite easy for us to stay there because my father's on dialysis, and so the whānau, we did his dialysis, and it means it didn't clog up or waste any of the nurses' time by doing Dad's dialysis. So they were grateful that we were there. But I want to talk about just words, how words are so important. And if you don't know what those wordings mean as a whānau, you can get caught up and get entrapped in what the doctors actually want to achieve with your elderly parent. And that's quite an emotional side to me. But I'll put that aside, and whānau, if I forget, I really want to talk about that experience. I'm not saying that my father didn't get the care that he needed. He did. He got exceptional care from the nurses, he got really good care from the doctors. But it's because I was there. It's because whether he would have got the same care if I wasn't there is another story. That's a whole nother story, because on the day that we I don't want to get into it. Like I said, I don't want to get into it today, otherwise my live will be so long, and my husband's waiting to go to Tāmaki on our trip out. What I'm going to do is quickly play a Russell Brand video. It's not too long. And it really highlights, Jacinda Ardern is blaming inflation on the Reserve Bank, and the governor, and you may have seen that going around on Facebook. And I mean, they're going to be blaming. They're saying we're not in a recession yet; it's coming. That it's not as bad as people. Is the doom and gloom isn't as bad, but we know, hey, when you've got a $200 billion debt that you created over 2 years for the COVID rollout and the COVID response, that impacts on inflation. When you have a war, I guess, well, arguably that impacts on inflation. So everything that's happened arguably impacts on inflation. But what has this government done to mitigate? So I'm going to play Russell Brand. We're going to have a quick kōrero when I come back. Now, please let me know, because I've been turning my laptop on and off because I've been on the travels with it, doing quite a bit of mahi with the whare, in the wharepuni space, and our hearing. We have a hearing next Friday, whānau, so I've been doing a lot of mahi there. And I don't know why you couldn't hear the national anthem, so it must have something to do with my settings that I have to rejig with. But I'm going to mute myself, and let me know, please, in your comments if you can't hear Russell. Then I'll have a tutu with my audio. Fingers crossed you can, because if you couldn't hear the national anthem, I'm a little bit concerned that you might not hear Russell's kōrero either. So I'm just going to put him up. Add. Yep. And I'm just going to mute, and then I'll play, but please let me know in the comments if you can hear him. Kia ora. Okay, apparently you can't hear. Hun, can you kati te kua, please? So I'm going to have to play. I'm going to have to unmute and play him. So I'll start back at the beginning. Yeah, it means something's up with my settings. Sorry, whānau. I'm going to start it again.
Things are bad and they are getting worse. We're getting poorer and poorer. Whose fault is it, though? Putin's? Trump's? Or is it powerful elites and corporations making needless, unnecessary, greedy profit? You decide. Hey, 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 you 5.7 million awakening wonders. Here we ride the algorithm together, remaining intelligent, staying awake, ignoring the mainstream media where necessary, finding new ways of coming together to create new freedom, both inside our consciousness and outside our consciousness. And for all we know, we are just nodes within an all-pervading conscious entity. How could we ever know? No one knows yet. We'll work it out by the end of the show. If you don't subscribe yet, subscribe right now. And please turn on that notification bell so that we can continue to cheat an algorithm that wants to keep us dumb. Let's stay free and stay awake, everybody. So, you will be aware that people are talking a lot about Putin's price hikes and why everything's much more expensive now, and why we're getting poorer, and why life since COVID has become a living hell, a perpetual nightmare, why Armageddon is upon us. Why is it happening? Is it because of Putin? Is it because of Trump? To illustrate some of these ideas, we're going to be looking at Crystal Bull, friend of the show, who went on Bill Maher this week. But before we get to Maher and Bull, let's have a look at the cause for all the problems that have ever happened. Trump.
Bill Maher, right? Everybody know Bill Maher, for example? He's a radical left maniac with modest television ratings.
Trump, he's still got it, and he can dish out a cuss pretty easily, Trump. The radical left-wing maniac with modest viewers. That's so many.
And as soon as he says something that's a little bit modest or temperate, Fox and others put him on to explain, oh, look, Bill Maher, a lefty. Bill Maher is saying wonderful things. They play right into the hand of the enemy. It's amazing. Sure, he laughs like hell at how stupid they are. They're kissing the ass of the enemy.
Politicians don't talk like that normally. This guy could be back in government, I would say, within 4 years, unless the Democrat Party, or I suppose the Republican Party, come up with someone who has that kind of rhetorical appeal, who has that kind of ease in front of an audience. If you're one of the people that just loathes Trump and thinks Trump is the worst thing that's ever happened in politics, I recognise how you might have come to those conclusions. If you're one of the people that likes Trump a lot, I can see why you would. There are reasonable arguments and assessments on both sides. But what I've said for a long time is if you are anti-Trump, you've got to look at the conditions that caused him. And when Matt Taibbi came on this show and he said that Trump understood that the Democrats couldn't argue with him on issues of corruption, funding, lobbying, not doing anything about Big Pharma, and the conditions that led to Trump, I think, have gotten worse since Trump. Do you think Biden's made a real difference since coming back in, tumbling about in his penny farthing? Do you think, few things better since Joe Biden's been in? You know, like the way he shut down Saudi Arabia, the great way that he's controlled farmer prices, the brilliant way that he's taken responsibility for the American economy. Oh no, none of that's happened, has it?
And in that case, his ass is not particularly pretty, is it? Not particularly pretty.
Like, who else would comment on someone's actual ass quality? That's Bill Maher's ass we've been invited to contemplate there. We went hard on Trump ages ago when he was running for the candidacy and stuff, but gotta say, the guy's funny. Let's have a look at Crystal Ball on Bill Maher, and maybe we'll have a look at Bill Maher's ass also. But Crystal Ball is, of course, focusing, I would imagine, more than on Bill Maher's ass, perhaps on the economic conditions in America that are demoralizing most people, that are exacerbating the disparity between elite and ordinary Americans. Why is it happening? Who's to blame? Are we being invited to regard convenient scapegoats as the problem, whether it's like immigration on the right or ordinary working class Americans if you're from the left, or is it Putin, or is it Trump? Whose fault is it? Is anyone benefiting from this?
Part of this inflationary problem is because we put too much money into the economy. There's way too much government spending, and that's why we have inflation. So that's a large part of that. It's basic economics.
That is not basic economics. We had this thing called a pandemic. We had a supply chain crisis, and by the way, there's a war in Ukraine. So to act like the only reason we have problems now is because people got a little bit of money in their bank account is just not honest.
And a little bit of money, they got more than we spent in World War II. So you don't act like...
Hold on.
Don't act like... You said don't act. Don't act like we had to react to the pandemic exactly the way we did. We had to spend $6 trillion.
Okay, but how about the trillions that the Federal Reserve shot at Wall Street? Somehow nobody gets upset about the rich people who got tons of money and tons of support, way more than working class people did.
Sure
but oh my God, people were able to feed their kids and they had a little bit of money in their bank accounts. It was the worst thing in the world.
No.
That is one small part of the inflation story, and is, by the way, not the only thing that we can deal with to get out of this mess.
Well, gas
so
prices.
Biden has advocated.
Gas prices we can largely attribute to an administration that's been waging war on the fossil fuel industry.
That's ridiculous.
And
They
now
drill more than everybody. I mean,
that's the talking
U.S.
point.
U.S. production.
No.
Okay, U.S. production is up.
Well,
it will be at record levels next year.
Okay, well,
the fossil fuel companies themselves are flush with cash, but will not invest in new drilling because they would rather give it to their shareholders.
Okay, all right,
That's the truth.
So, fossil fuel companies, record profits. Billionaires, record profits. The biggest wealth transfer in history. Whatever's gone on in the last couple of years, it benefited the most powerful interests in the world just fine. But how did the Federal Reserve want to deal with this? By lowering your wages. Federal Reserve Chair and former private equity exec Jerome Powell, that's a coincidence, has promised to tackle inflation by lowering workers' wages. If there's one thing that controls the world, it's ordinary people who don't earn much money. At the same time, he has declined to implement a law to reduce the skyrocketing paychecks of his former colleagues on Wall Street. This is precisely what Crystal is talking about. Invisible stimulus packages were offered to the financial industry, and even Bill Maher, who's hosting a show about this stuff, was unaware of it. This is what people mean when they say that the mainstream media manages the narrative. Certain information is highlighted, other information obfuscated, then our reality is derived from the available information. This is what we're trying to do on this channel. Highlight voices that are talking about important information that might otherwise be marginalized. While former private equity executive and Federal Reserve Bank Chair Jerome Powell takes aim at workers with a pledge to get wages down to combat inflation, he has declined to implement a law to reduce the skyrocketing paychecks of his former colleagues on Wall Street. He has also approved and financed a merger wave that critics say has inflated the cost cost of consumer financial services. Note how consistently and regularly ordinary people or people without much power are located as the cause of vast economic and social problems. But if you just keep in mind this idea, how can people that don't have much power have much influence? It sort of just stands to reason. It's a simple systemic way of thinking about these matters. The 2010 Dodd-Frank financial reform law mandated the creation of a rule to rein in Wall Street bonuses. The rule is supposed to be developed and implemented by 6 regulatory agencies, including the Federal Reserve that Powell runs. But as he has sounded the alarm about inflation and wages, Powell has so far done nothing to help create that rule, even as Wall Street bonuses just hit an all-time record of $45 billion in a single year. So all the while we're talking about an economic crisis, the cost of living rising, there's been a world record year in bonuses. That doesn't make sense. How can those things not be connected? Wouldn't you feel that you were living in a more reasonable society if people said, look, the cost of living's gone up and people that are working in the financial industry are not earning as much money as they used to? It's extraordinary that we can't correlate these necessarily connected pieces of information. Dodd-Frank mandates the Wall Street compensation rule require banks to ensure that their executive compensation packages do not incentivize risky behavior, such as risky lending to hedge funds like Archegos Capital Management, which collapsed in 2021 under the weight of hundreds of millions of dollars in loans from major banks like Goldman Sachs. We know that in 2008, there was an economic crisis that is still impacting the lives of ordinary Americans and people across the world to this day. That was precisely because of these types of behavior no one's ever been prosecuted for, that there were stimulus packages introduced then as now to protect the elite and elite structures that dominate ordinary lives. So we cannot allow the mainstream media to continually locate ordinary Americans as the problem. This past February, Sarah Bloom Raskin, President Joe Biden's nominee to be the Fed's vice chair for supervision, promised to implement the law. Bloom Raskin withdrew her nomination amid opposition from corporatist Democrats and every Republican senator. So someone was going to implement that law. That person's gone away now. So the Biden administration isn't going to do anything, are they? In response to rising inflation, Powell could crack down on Wall Street bonuses, demand the closure of the private equity tax loophole, or use the Fed's power to block bank mergers. All just sensible suggestions for controlling the economy in ways that would be impactful without annihilating the lives of ordinary Americans. Instead, Powell's anti-inflation campaign has focused on raising interest rates to reduce the money supply, a policy that tends to increase unemployment and put downward pressure on rank-and-file workers' wages. The result is a much higher degree of misery for ordinary Americans, while the overall purchasing power of the country is reduced. Powell and the senior Fed leadership have little connection to that suffering. Powell was a senior executive at the Carlyle Group for much of his career, and his financial disclosures show an enormous investment portfolio worth up to $55 million. Imagine how different it would be if these positions at a national and local, federal and state level were filled by an assembly of elected officials drawn from the communities that they regulate, rather than an elite merry-go-round of individuals that operate only in this sphere, that have alliances only in this sphere, have an ideology that's about the protection of this sphere. How will you ever change America when utilizing personnel that are invested in it staying the same? Let me know in the comments below if you know how this works. The Federal Reserve, or Fed, is the most powerful economic institution in the United States, perhaps the world. Its core responsibilities include setting interest rates, managing the money supply, and regulating financial markets. In essence, they create the financial conditions that you live within. And by identifying ordinary Americans as the problem, they are able to continue to protect the interests of the powerful while creating social tension, poverty, devastation. Meanwhile, the media will participate by stoking tensions between different cultural groups. So you never go, hang on a minute, what's actually happening? For much of the last year, the Fed was consumed with a scandal in which Powell's vice chair, as well as the heads of the Dallas and Boston Federal Reserve Banks, were found to have engaged in insider trading. So even within a corrupt system, they managed to find time for extracurricular corruption that they're not even supposed to be doing within their rigged and corrupt system. They cannot get enough corruption. They're corruption addicts. There has to be an intervention. They have to be stopped. An intervention at an international scale is revolution. The pandemic led to one of the greatest wealth transfers in history. So if you were to look at it with the template that, wow, this was a con. I'm not saying there wasn't a pandemic. I'm not saying coronavirus isn't real. I'm not saying anything like that. But if the objective was to generate more power for the powerful, more wealth for the wealthy, it was a success. Allegedly, while Russian billionaires have been the focus of attention due to the ongoing fighting in Ukraine and the ensuing sanctions against Russian individuals and entities, their counterparts in the United States added $5 trillion to their fortunes during the pandemic, according to Oxfam. $5 trillion is one of those numbers that's inconceivable. No wonder we have to continually identify convenient villains to target our attention towards. The total wealth of billionaires jumped from 8.6 trillion in March 2020 to 13.8 trillion in November 2021, a bigger increase than in the previous 14 years combined. During the pandemic, the ability of governments to regulate and control populations increased. The ability of big tech companies to control, observe individual data increased. The wealth of the most powerful institutions, individuals, and elites in the world increased. So while it might have been a crisis in your life, it was not a crisis in their reality. You live in a different reality from them. You are governed by people that operate from within that reality, that take jobs in the various individual nodes within that sphere. How are you ever going to get change that meaningfully impacts your life from the individuals and institutions that operate within that strata? Let me know in the comments. The world's richest 10 men saw their collective wealth more than double, shooting up by 1.3 billion a day. So how are you going to get contradictory voices? How are you going to get oppositional voices? Where are these voices going to come from? Everyone agrees that power and wealth must be concentrated within that realm. Billionaires have had a terrific pandemic. Central banks pumped trillions of dollars into financial markets to save the economy, yet much of that has ended up lining the pockets of billionaires riding a stock market boom, said Gabriela Boucher, Oxfam's executive director. The same way that there could have been a regulation introduced that the pharmaceutical companies that profited from the medicines that emerged in the pandemic must redistribute that wealth and profit back into the nations and communities that in many cases developed the technologies and medicines that they profited from. These financial packages should have been returned into the community as well. Bear in mind what Julian Assange said. The function of government is to transfer public money, that's your money, into private hands. If you remember that template, you'll see how frequently it plays out. And it seems to me that the current economic crisis is just another example of that paradigm playing out in our lives, in your lives, in our reality. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Your opinions and your views are more important than mine. Let me know what information we've missed. Let me know what information we could highlight. Remember to give this a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel if you don't subscribe already. Turn on the notification bell so that we can cheat that algorithm into giving us everything that we deserve. If you enjoyed this video, have a look at either of these. And please sign up to my mailing list. Every week we do live online conversations on Zoom and other platforms. We do real life live events. We can build something together if you are willing to sign up to that mailing list right there. Please, more important than that though, stay free.
No, sorry. My husband's just asking if we're finished, but I'm going to quickly wrap up because he's waiting. He's so patient, my darling, waiting to take us to league. But I just want to quickly summarize just some of the notes that oh, isn't he amazing? Isn't he bloody amazing, Russell Brand? He is my favorite. So he talks about fossil fuel company record profits, wealthy corporations and private individuals record profits, telling us, that we are the problem and we need to lower our wages while there are record profits. And the fact that our reality about all of this is derived from mainstream media, which we know are sponsored and probably have. And what he talked about, technocrats, record profits. Everybody's profiting, and everybody is. Well, I mean, if we listen to what Russell Brand had to say, and we compare to what's happening in our country, what's happening around the world is happening in our country. Mainstream media isn't reporting on what they should be reporting on, and actually part of the problem. Here's the reason why we can't trust them. And go to the platform, Sean Plunkett's social media platform. There's some interesting stuff there, and like I do need to have a kōrero about co-governance, about the three waters as well. But like I say, my priority is with my papa, and I don't know when I'm going to be able to do another live again. Sorry, because I'm going to head back to Taranaki and tag my whānau out again. I still have a lot of stuff that I need to put in place for my papa. And there's an interesting kōrero there. Interesting kōrero with our wharepuni. Again, with the rollout of the boosters, we've seen a massive increase in our whānau passing again. And now the government's pushing for the fourth treatment. And it just... not even our own whānau are connecting the dots, which is really, really concerning. Really, really concerning. They know their puku tells them something's wrong. They don't quite know what's wrong, but they can't quite believe that this government is actively doing what they're doing. And yet we have been colonised and we've seen genocide in the past, and yet we think that it's not going to happen. And are our Māori leaders naively being used as pawns in this whole process? And you look at Matariki, and you look at the 24th of the 6th, 2022, someone highlighted to me 666. And if you look at the satanic behavior of Freemasons, they are what you call Luciferians, right? And there's a lot of, whānau, you go do your own history on that. I have my own perspective. You may have your own perspective. Again, the fact that they made yesterday Matariki Day on the 6th, the 666. Is that concerning? Does that raise a red flag when we're looking at symbolisms? Anyway, carrying on with, because I'm conscious of my darling wants to go. Carrying on with Russell Brand. He also talked about a world record in bonuses. So everybody, apart from the ordinary person, the elite and those that prop up the elite, are all getting fucking wealthy off our backs. The transfer from public money into private hands, all that research that Big Pharma are benefiting from came from the research that public funding paid for. We got to remember all this, whānau, and come the next election, Sue Gray did bloody awesome in Tauranga. We still got the special votes to come in, and she's going to hit that 5% threshold. And we need to know that going in. Forming a coalition is still a priority, whether or not it happens, whānau, whether or not people can put their egos behind them, put their our differences behind us. And there are big gaps there. There are big gaps, and do this for the betterment of all of us. That's an exciting time for me. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm not I'm not going to say that it's never going to happen. You just got to keep on knocking on that door. You got to keep on putting that olive branch out, because this is our last chance, folks. Really, seriously. There's more at stake than just our health. What's at stake? Because if you take our freedoms and rights away, there is no peace. We are run by a totalitarian government, a fascist government, and we're already seen and experienced that already. So don't think that this is misinformation, disinformation, or the other C word, right? We've already experienced it. So I am the voice for those that have been vaccine injured. I am the voice for those that have been vaccine injured and passed away. I am a voice for those that have been mandated out of their jobs. I've seen the shortage in the hospital in the weeks that I've been in hospital with my father. Why the fuck, sorry for swearing, but why the fuck can the government not, and I've been screaming that out for weeks and months now, bring the unvaccinated nurses and doctors back into the hospitals, because we're that fucking desperate. You know why? Because it's all about politics and not about people. If this government was really about the people, they would let that happen, because they know our health system is in a crisis. Our health system is broken. And these doctors and nurses that are there are band-aids trying to hold this whole health system together. So anyway, like I say, that's another kōrero. And what Russell said is it's absolutely extraordinary how we can't correlate between the wealthy being transferred our wealth to them, our power to them. And we, as the people, cannot correlate. That's like my husband said, when our nephew passed away, within that week, well, within days, he was the 8th tangi, right? He was the 8th tangi. And then after our nephew passed away, there were 3 that happened straight after. He said his whānau knows something's not right, but they cannot correlate, or they cannot connect the dots. Even within my own whānau, the fact that I've been, and I'm not afraid to say to the doctors, my father is vaccine injured. He got injured when he took the second jab and he took the booster, and this is the illnesses that he got. Interesting enough, I just received his record, and I said to Mum, I'm taking Dad's medical record. And she said, why? And I said, because I need his records to have on tap. In Dad's records, his health records, it showed he had no vascular heart problems prior to 2021. What happened in 2021? The vaccines. So even in my father's own records, it states there. And yet still, not even my own whānau. Well, I think my whānau are struggling. They're struggling with me because I'm not afraid to state what I state. I'm not afraid to say it to the doctors. I'm not afraid to say it to the nurses. And they don't argue with me. They just shut up, basically. But the fact that that's on Dad's record tells me that I know that my father is vaccine injured, because what they're implying is it's hard to prove. Well, no, it's not. No, it's not. The time frame alone, as far as I'm concerned, proves it. Myocarditis on his record proves it. Pericarditis and pleurisy proves it. Him getting thrush and mouth and stomach ulcers, throat ulcers, prove it. They're all, and it's in Visor's records, safety records, they're all serious side effects of the vaccine. Okay, and I've just received, now I'm contemplating how I'm going to bring that into one of my lives. I've just received data that actually shows how vaccinated people, and this is record, this is actual fact record, and data. That's why data is so important. Data takes you out of the misinformation, disinformation, and conspiracy realm. Data speaks facts and truths. And what this video that I received showed all these different data of this research that was done that actually proves that people's immune systems plummet after they've been vaccinated. Plummet after they've been vaccinated. So yeah, anyway, put that aside. I'm not showing that today, but I'm trying to get in. How many weeks have I missed of my lives? I'm trying to get so much information to you without overloading this live. What Russell also spoke about in this video was stimulus packages like Air New Zealand. Remember Air New Zealand and corporations, they got stimulus packets because of the pandemic and the rollout. And really, he said what that's there to do is to protect the elite and to protect the status quo and to protect the elite's lives. Not to protect us. They use our money to protect themselves. And, we've got to remember these things. Okay, and the government is a tool to transfer funds, our taxes, our money into private pockets. Don't forget that. Our funds, our taxes are used as stimuli packages to protect the elite and their way of life. It's not there to protect us, because now when inflation goes up, they say your wages have to go down. So it's our fault. Our wages have to go down because we want all your money for us. And so we cannot keep on doing the same thing expecting a different outcome, whānau. So I'd say a third of New Zealand have awoken. I'd say that if they're not haven't awoken, enough of us have planted enough seeds. Yes, I might get some challenges with my own whānau, but I've planted enough seeds to make them think about it. I mean, if you go and support an organisation that's there to roll out the vaccines, and you're part of that program, then you need to sit there, think about it, and think, what am I doing to help the situation, or what am I doing to either part of the problem or part of the solution? That's my point there. Okay, what else? Yeah, and so basically what Russell is saying, we keep on electing or selecting are the same officials that are going to carry on protecting the status quo. We need to change that. We need to change that, and hence the reason why the next general election is so bloody important, whānau. But we'll get on to that in another live. Yeah, because if we keep on electing people that are going to protect and the status quo, then we're part of the problem. We're not part of the solution. So, and then he talked about a corrupt system, and they're so blatant and so arrogant that they're corrupt within a corrupt system, and they find extra corruption. Now that made me laugh, because that's exactly what happens. They're so corrupt, and yet they'll find extra ways of corrupting themselves because they can get away with it. And they need to be stopped, And what's happening in the UK or US is happening here. It's happening to all the Western countries around the world, because the pandemic has brought us closer together. The world pandemic has put us all in the same basket. So we know that the status quo generates more wealth for the rich and powerful. We're in a crisis of our life, and they aren't. So there are record profits, record money being spent, given to them. We're in a crisis, but they're not. Remember that, whānau? Remember, billionaires, their income is increased on average by $1.3 billion per day. Per day, right? So, come on. Our whānau is struggling to put bloody bread and butter on the table, and these bastards' profits increased by $1.3 billion per day. And the big pharma, with the huge amount of profits that they've been making, especially Pfizer and Moderna and the likes, billions of dollars, trillions of dollars, they've come from our pockets to theirs. And the knowledge and information and the research comes from what our funded research as well. They didn't come up with the research themselves, but they've profited from us. Again, we can't forget that. The function of government, thus far, as what we're seeing around the world, is to transfer our money into their pockets. Remember that. Okay, nearly at the end, and my husband's been so patient. I want to thank you all. I'm out of breath. I haven't got time to go through your questions today because he is being very patient. But thank you, Dean, Marianne, Hine, Frida, Carly. You fellas are awesome. George, Kathleen, Terry, Ramai, Lynn, Dean. I'm just going through some names. Thank you all. If I've missed out your names, aroha mai. Charlie, o kia ora taku whanaunga. Fiona, kia ora anō. Natalie, Wiki. Awesome. Thank you, whānau. I'm going to shut down now, close my live down. I can't say when I'm going to do another live. Sorry if that felt rushed, but it is, because my darling wants to take me to Tamaki Makaurau to watch the league game. And, I hope you fellas have an awesome weekend. And, I hope my lives aren't too far apart from each other. Kia pai tō rā, ka kite anō. Love you all. Ka kite.